The woman set a single bottle of water and a roll of mints on the belt, and when Imani counted out the coins, the woman closed her hand around them and pushed them back. "Keep the change," she said. "I won't need it anymore." It was $4.11, a small amount, the kind of amount that gets dropped in a jar by the register and forgotten. It was the way she said it that made Imani look up. Not bitter, not in a hurry, soft, almost relieved, the way a person sounds when they have finally set down something heavy they have carried for a long time. Imani had heard 1,000 people say keep the change in 3 years at that register. She had never once felt the floor tilt under her, the way it tilted then. The woman picked up her water and walked out through the sliding doors into the grey afternoon, and Imani watched her go, and the next customer was already setting a gallon of milk on the belt, and the line behind him stretched back past the gum and the batteries. Imani rang the milk. Her hands knew the work. Her eyes kept going to the doors, though, to the parking lot beyond the glass, to a silver sedan backing slowly out of a space near the cart return. This is the story of a $4 tip that nobody else would have noticed, and the 6 blocks a tired woman ran in her work shoes because she did notice, and what came back to her months later because of it. Stay with it. It does not go where you think. Imani Boyd was 29 years old, and she had worked Register 4 at Hargate Foods on Delano Avenue for 3 years and 2 months. She knew the stall the way you know a house you have lived in too long. She knew which carts pulled left. She knew that the cooler by the eggs hummed off-key. She knew that the manager, a heavyset man named Russ who meant well and was tired in the same bone-deep way she was, would let her take a 15-minute break at 2 if the line was short, and never if it wasn't. She had a daughter, Naya, who was 6 and missing her 2 front teeth, and who drew pictures of the 3 of them, Imani and Naya and Imani's mother, standing in a row, holding hands under a yellow sun. She had her mother, Odessa, who watched Naya in the evenings, and whose knees had gone bad from 40 years of standing at a sewing machine. The 3 of them lived in a 2-bedroom apartment over a laundromat, and the rent had gone up $90 in the spring, and Imani had not yet figured out where the $90 was going to come from. She was not a woman who chased anything. She did not have the energy for it. By the end of a shift, her feet felt like 2 bags of wet sand, and the most she chased was the bus, and even then only if the driver saw her coming and waited. So she could not afterward fully explain to anyone what made her do what she did. The line at Register 4 cleared a little after the woman left. Imani told Pearl on Register 3 to watch her draw. Pearl was 61 and had a laugh like a screen door and had worked at Hargate longer than the building had been painted its current beige. She said, "Where you going, baby?" And Imani said, "I'll be right back." And she stepped around the end of her register and walked fast toward the doors. And then, when she was through them and the cold air hit her, she ran. The silver sedan had not gone far. It was stopped at the light at Delano and 6th third car back, blinker off, just sitting in the line of traffic. Imani's apron flapped against her legs. Her name badge bounced. She did not have a plan. She did not know what she would say if she caught it. She only knew that "I won't need it anymore" was not a thing a person said about loose change, and that she had looked into the woman's face when she said it, and the woman's face had been calm in a way that frightened her more than crying would have. The light turned green. The sedan moved. Imani kept running. She ran past the check-cashing place and the shuttered shoe store and the corner where the men sold incense out of a folding table on warm days. She ran past a bus stop where 2 teenagers watched her go by with mild interest. Her lungs began to burn at the 2nd block and were afire by the 4th. The sedan caught a yellow at 8th and made it through, and Imani's heart dropped because she thought she had lost it, but then a delivery truck pulled out from a loading bay and the silver car had to brake, and the gap closed, and Imani closed it with it. 6 blocks. Later, when she tried to count them, she counted 6. Delano and 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and then the side street by the old theatre where the sedan finally pulled to the curb, not because Imani had caught it, but because the woman had seen her in the mirror. Imani came up alongside the driver's window with her hand pressed flat against her own chest, gasping, unable for a moment to make any words at all. The window came down. The woman inside looked at her, and there was no fear in her face, only a kind of tired puzzlement, as if Imani were a thing she could not place. You forgot your change, Imani said. It was all she could think of. It was a lie, and they both knew it was a lie, because Imani's hands were empty. The woman looked at Imani's empty hands. Then she looked at Imani's face, which was wet now, and not only from running. Imani had never met this woman before that afternoon. She would not learn her name for another hour. She leaned her forearms on the door of a stranger's car on a side street by a dead movie theatre, and she caught her breath, and she said the only true thing she had. I heard you, she said. I heard what you said, and I couldn't just let you drive off. For a long moment the woman did not answer. Her hands stayed on the wheel at 10 and 2, the way you learn in a class when you are 16 and have not yet learned that nobody drives that way. And then the calm broke, all at once, the way ice breaks, and the woman put her face down against her own hands on the wheel, and her shoulders began to shake, and the sound that came out of her was not loud, but it was the worst sound Imani had ever heard, because it was the sound of someone who had decided to be quiet about it. Her name was Camille. Imani learned that much sitting in the passenger seat of the car which she got into without being invited, simply opening the door and lowering herself in because her legs would not hold her up any longer, and because she was not going to stand on a curb shouting through a window at a person who was breaking apart. She did not learn Camille's last name that day. She did not learn much of anything in terms of facts. The facts came later. What she got that afternoon was the shape of a grief. There had been a son. He was 4. There had been a long word for what was wrong with him, a word with too many syllables, and a year of hospitals, and then a smaller and smaller boy in a bigger and bigger bed, and then a morning in March when the room had gone quiet. That had been 14 months ago. Camille had a husband who had buried himself in his work, because work was a thing he could do with his hands, and she had a large house she could not stand to be alone in, and she had been, she said, just driving. For days she had just been driving, filling the tank, driving until it was low, filling it again. She had stopped at the store for water because her mouth was dry. She had not planned to say anything to anyone. The words had come out on their own, she said, and once they were out, she had felt lighter, and the lightness had scared her less than it should have. Imani did not say much. She had learned from her own losses, which were different but were losses, that there is a kind of pain that does not want to be talked out of itself. It only wants a person to sit next to it and not leave. So she sat. The heater ticked. Nas. The lights went long and gold across the dashboard. After a while, Camille wiped her face with the back of her hand and laughed once, wetly, and said, "You ran 6 blocks in those shoes." "They're terrible shoes," Imani said. And Camille laughed again, and it was a real one this time, small but real. And Imani felt something in her own chest unclench that she had not known was clenched. When the gold light started to go blue, Imani said she had to get back, that she had left her drawer with Pearl, and Russ would be looking for her, and that she had a daughter to pick up. Camille said she would drive her. On the way back up Delano's 6 blocks. The easy way, Camille asked her name, and Imani told her, and Camille said it back to herself once, quietly, the way you do when you are trying to keep a thing. At the curb in front of Hargate, Camille put the car in park and did not let Imani out right away. "I want to give you something," she said, and reached for the bag on the back seat, and Imani stopped her with a hand on her arm. "You don't owe me anything," Imani said. "You keep your change." And she got out and went back into the fluorescent light and the smell of floor wax and overripe bananas, and she found Russ standing by register 4 with his arms crossed and his face caught between worry and irritation. And she told him a customer had needed help to her car, which was true enough, and she clocked the rest of her shift. And she did not tell anyone, not Pearl, not her mother, what had really happened on the side street by the theatre. It felt like it belonged to Camille. It was not Imani's to spend. She did not expect to ever see the woman again. The weeks went the way. The weeks went. Naya lost a 3rd tooth and put it under her pillow, and Imani, who had $2 in her wallet and rent in 9 days, put $1 under there in the dark and felt the old, familiar arithmetic close around her throat. Odessa's knees got worse in the damp. The manager cut everyone's Sunday hours because corporate had sent down a memo about labor costs, and Sunday hours were time and a half, and the $90 extra of rent stopped being a problem Imani had not solved and became a problem Imani could not solve. She did the things you do. She called the rental office and asked for a week, and the woman on the phone, who was not unkind, said she could give her until the 5th, but not past the 5th. The woman's name was Donna, and she had said it twice into the phone like an apology until the 5th. Imani, I really am sorry. And Imani had thanked her because Donna was a person doing a job and the math that was crushing. Imani was not Donna's math to fix. Imani sold the good winter coat, the one with a real lining, the one she had bought 2 winters back at a church sale and mended at the cuff with thread that almost matched, to a consignment place for $19. And the girl behind the counter turned it inside out and frowned at the mended cuff and offered her 17, and Imani said 19 and held the girl's eyes until she got 19 because she had run 6 blocks and she was not going to lose $2 to a frown. She told Naya she had given the coat to someone who needed it more, which Naya accepted because Naya believed her mother was the kind of person who would do that, and Naya was right. She skipped lunch, and when Pearl noticed and tried to push half a sandwich across the break room table, Imani said she'd eaten big at breakfast, which Pearl did not believe and let her have anyway. She skipped the bus and walked the 40 minutes when the weather allowed it, down Delano past the same shuttered shoe store she had run past chasing the silver car, and put the saved fare, $1.75 a day, into the jar on top of the refrigerator where the rent money lived. The jar filled slowly and the 5th came fast. She was $11 short on the morning of the 4th. $11. She stood in the kitchen with the jar open in front of her and counted it twice, and it was $11 short, and Naya was at the table eating cereal and swinging her legs, and Odessa was in the other room, and Imani stood very still and did not let her face do anything, because if her face did anything, Naya would see it. That is where she was. That is the size of the world she was standing in. $11, and a child swinging her legs, and a jar on top of a refrigerator. Hold that, because the world was about to get much larger, and it is worth remembering how small it had been. Russ found her in the break room at the end of her shift that afternoon. He had a slip of paper in his hand and a look on his face she could not read. "There's a woman up front asking for you," he said. "By name, wouldn't tell me what for." Imani's first thought, the cold reflex of a person who lives close to the edge, was that it was the rental office, that they had sent someone, that the 5th had come early somehow. She wiped her hands on her apron and went up front, and standing by the customer service counter, out of place, against the lottery signs and the cigarette racks, was Camille. She looked different. Her hair was done. She was wearing a coat that had cost more than Imani made in a month, a soft camel-colored thing, and she was holding a leather folder against her chest with both arms the way she had held the wheel at 10 and 2. Her face, when she saw Imani, was the same face from the car. Relieved, a little afraid. "Glad." "I found you," Camille said. "I wasn't sure of your last name. I had to describe you. I told them the cashier who ran." They sat in Camille's car again, in the lot this time, because there was nowhere private in a grocery store, and because the car had become, without either of them deciding it, the place where the two of them told the truth. And Camille told her the rest of it, facts she had not given before. Her full name was Camille Hartwell. The name did not mean anything to Imani, and Camille watched her face to see if it would, and seemed relieved when it didn't. Her husband ran a logistics company. And her father, Camille said, looking out the windshield at the beige wall of the store, her father was named Gideon Hartwell, and he owned, among a great many other things, the company that owned the store they were sitting in front of. Hargate Foods, 41 of them, across 3 states. Her father owned the building, the registers, the bananas, the jar by the register where the loose change went. He owned the place where Imani had stood for 3 years and 2 months wringing milk. Imani did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "That's a lot of grocery stores." "It is," Camille said, and almost smiled. "He started with one. A corner store with his name over the door. He likes to tell people that," He started with one store and his own 2 hands, and now he can't walk through any of them without 3 managers following him around, so he doesn't anymore. He sends a man to look at the numbers, and the man sends him a report. She turned in the seat to face Imani. My father lost his grandson, she said. He lost Eli the same March I did. And he did what he does, he went quiet and he went to work, except there is no work that fixes it. And so he has just been a man in a big office reading reports about grocery stores for 14 months, and I have been driving my car until the tank runs out, and we have not been able to say a single true thing to each other since the funeral, because every true thing is too big to pick up. Imani waited. I told him about you, Camille said. I didn't mean to. He called to ask if I had eaten, which is the only thing he knows how to ask me now, and I started to say I was fine, and instead I told him about the cashier who chased my car for 6 blocks because she heard something in my voice. I told him a stranger I have nothing in common with. Looked at me harder than anyone who is paid to love me has looked at me in a year. And my father was quiet on the phone for so long I thought the call had dropped. And then he said, I want to meet her. Imani's mouth was dry. Why? She said. Because, Camille said, you saved something he didn't know he still had. I think you should let him tell you the rest himself. There is a kind of fear that has nothing to do with danger. It is the fear of a person who has been small and overlooked for a long time being suddenly looked at by someone large. Imani felt it in the elevator of the Hartwell building 3 days later, riding up past floors with names she did not recognize stenciled on glass doors, in a blouse Pearl had pressed for her because Pearl was the only one she had told, and Pearl had cried and then ironed the blouse and said, You go up there with your back straight, you hear me. You didn't do anything wrong, you did everything right. The office on the top floor was not what she expected. She had expected marble and cold. There was marble in the lobby, far below, but up here the room was warm, the light low and golden through tall windows, the city spread out small and grey beyond the glass. And the man who stood up from behind the desk was not what she expected either. Gideon Hartwell was 63 years old and broad through the shoulders in a way that age had not taken from him, and his beard had gone mostly grey, and his eyes when they found her face were not the eyes of a man who owned 41 grocery stores. They were the eyes of the woman in the car. They were a father's eyes, and they were tired in the same place Imani's were tired. He came around the desk, and he did not shake her hand. He took it in both of his and held it, and he said in a low voice that had a tremble in it, he did not try to hide, Thank you for my daughter. Imani had practiced on the bus and in the elevator a careful and humble thing to say. She did not say it, she said, She's worth chasing. And the big man's face came apart. Just for a second, the way Camille's had on the wheel, and then he gathered it back, and he gestured to a chair, and they sat, and he told her the part Camille had said he should tell himself. He had been watching, he said, not her, not in the moment. After Camille had told him about the cashier who ran, though he had not been able to let it go. He had a habit, he said, an old shopkeeper's habit he had never lost, of wanting to know who was standing behind the counters in his stores, because once that had been him, a young man behind a counter watching the door. So he had asked his man to pull a file, just the file, hours, attendance, the small machinery of an employee record. He had not meant anything by it. He had wanted to put a shape to the person who had chased his Camille. He had read the file the way he read everything, now looking for nothing, expecting nothing, and then he had stopped on the second page. You walk to work, he said. When the weather's good. 40 minutes. Imani's face went hot. Sometimes, she said. He nodded slowly. The file does not say that, he said. The file says you clock in early and you clock out on time, and you have not missed a shift in 3 years except one in the spring when your daughter had a fever and you took it without pay rather than leave her, and you made it up by covering 2 Sundays. For a woman named Pearl whose sister was dying. The file says your Sunday hours were cut in a memo I signed. Without reading, a memo about labor costs. 11 days ago. The file says a great many things if a man bothers to read them. It does not say you walk 40 minutes to save bus fare. My man told me that. He went and looked because I asked him to, and that is what he came back with. that you have been walking." He leaned forward, his big hands together. "I have been signing memos about labor costs for 14 months, he said, because numbers are the only thing left that hold still. And one of those numbers, it turns out, is a woman who ran 6 blocks in bad shoes for a stranger and then walks 40 minutes home so her little girl can have what she needs. I did not see you. I built a company so I would not have to see you. So the seeing could be somebody else's job, a report on a desk, and you saw my daughter through a car window in the time it takes to make change. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, the city went about its evening. I am not going to insult you," Gideon said, "by writing you a check the way a man writes a check to feel better about himself and never think of you again. I asked you here because I would like to know what you need, not what I can give. What you actually need. And I would like you to tell me plainly because I have spent a year surrounded by people who tell me what they think I want to hear, and I cannot stand the sound of it anymore." Imani thought about the jar on top of the refrigerator. She thought about the $11. She thought about Naya swinging her legs and Odessa's knees and the rent that was due in 2 days that she still did not have. And pride rose up in her, because pride is the last thing the poor are allowed to keep, and they hold it hard. She almost said nothing. She almost said, "I didn't do it for this." And then she heard Camille's voice from the car, saying, "You saw me harder than anyone paid to love me." And she understood that to say nothing would be its own kind of lie, the lie of a person too proud to be seen all the way, and she had not let Camille get away with that, and she would not get away with it herself. So she told him. Her rent had gone up $90. She was $11 short for the 5th, which was the day after tomorrow, and she did not yet know what she was going to do about it, and beyond that there was always something, a tooth, a coat, a fever. The thin margin of a life lived $11 from the edge. Her mother's knees needed a doctor they could not afford. Her daughter needed shoes that fit because children's feet do not wait for a good month. She did not need to be rich, she said. She had never once in her life imagined being rich and would not know what to do with it. She needed the ground to stop moving under her feet. She needed to stand still for one season and not be doing math. Gideon Hartwell listened to all of it without moving, the way Imani had sat in the car and listened to Camille without moving, and she understood that he was a man who knew how to do that, how to sit next to a thing and not leave, and that perhaps that was where Camille had learned it. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, $11. Yes, she said. He shook his head, not at her, at himself, at the world, at a year of memos. And then he did a thing that surprised her. He did not reach for a checkbook. He picked up the phone on his desk and he asked someone to come in, and a few minutes later a younger man came in with a folder, and Gideon said, "This is the woman." And the younger man looked at Imani with frank curiosity, and Gideon began, very plainly, to make the ground stop moving. It did not happen the way it happens in a story where money rains from the sky. Gideon Hartwell was a shopkeeper, and shopkeepers do not throw money, they place it. He did not give Imani a fortune. What he did, over the following weeks with Camille sitting in on every conversation, because Camille had decided this was hers too, was build a floor under a life that had not had one. The cut Sunday hours came back, not just for Imani but store-wide, because Gideon had pulled the memo and read it the second time the way he should have read it the first and had not liked what he saw. That was not a gift to Imani. That was a man fixing a thing he had broken in his grief, and it touched 400 people who never knew why. It touched Imani too, and her Sundays came back at time and a half. And the jar on the refrigerator began for the first time in a year to fill faster than it emptied. The doctor for Odessa's knees was arranged through a clinic the company already funded and that Imani had never been told about because nobody had ever bothered to tell the cashiers what the company funded. The shoes for Naya Camille handled herself and would not be talked out of it, and took Naya to a real shoe store and let her pick, and Naya picked a pair with lights in the heels that lit up when she stamped, and Camille, who had not bought a child's shoes in 14 months. Night sat in the little chair in the shoe store and watched a 6-year-old stamp her light-up heels on the carpet and laugh, and had to step outside for a minute, and Imani let her go and did not follow because she understood. And the rent, the $11 and the $90 and the whole grinding sum of it. Gideon did not pay Imani's rent. He told her plainly he would not, because a paid bill is a thing that runs out, and he was not interested in giving her a thing that ran out. Instead, he asked her a question. He asked her what she thought a store ran on. And Imani, who had stood at Register 4 for 3 years and 2 months, told him, "Not the registers," she said, "not the trucks. The people who know where everything is. The pearls. The woman who has been there long enough to know that the cooler by the eggs hums off key and which carts pull left, and which customer is about to walk out without paying and which one just needs someone to say good morning to her like she's a person. That," she said, "that's what a store runs on, and you can't put it in a memo." Gideon Hartwell looked at her for a long time after she said that, and then he offered her a job. Not a raise at the register, a job. He had a thing he had been wanting to build for 2 years and had never had the right person for, a position that did not have a clean name yet, somebody who would go store to store, all 41 of them, and find the pearls, and find the women who were $11 from the edge, and find the ones about to be cut by a memo signed without reading, and make sure somebody up top actually saw them. A pair of eyes for a man who had built a company so he would not have to see. He had tried to fill it with consultants. The consultants had given him reports. He did not want another report. He wanted someone who had walked 40 minutes home. It would mean more money than Imani had ever made. It would mean a salary, a real one, the kind with the same number every 2 weeks, no matter what the weather did. It would mean she would not stand at Register 4 anymore, and when she understood that, she felt a strange grief, because Register 4 had been hers, and the people in her line had been hers, and Pearl was there, and you do not leave a place that held you up for 3 years without feeling it leave. She said she needed to think. Gideon said good. He said he distrusted anyone who didn't. She thought about it for 2 days, which were the 2 days that contained the 5th, and on the 5th she did not stand in her kitchen short $11, because the Sunday hours had already begun to land and because Camille had, quietly, without being asked, made sure the rental office understood there would be no eviction. And in language Imani only learned about later, and that made her cry when she did. On the 5th, Imani walked to work because the weather was good and because she wanted to, and she stood at Register 4 and she rang milk and counted change and said good morning to a woman who needed to hear it, and she decided she would take the job, but on one condition. The condition was Pearl. Pearl, who was 61 and had ironed her blouse, who had covered shifts for a dying sister and never been thanked for it by anyone with the power to thank her. Imani would take the job if Pearl got her register hours protected until Pearl herself decided to stop, and if, when that day came, Pearl walked out the door with a real pension and not the thin nothing the company offered the people who had given it the most. Gideon agreed before she finished the sentence. He said it should not have taken a condition. He said it should have been the policy. He made it the policy. 400 pearls. Again, who never knew the name of the woman who had stood in a warm office and refused to take care of only herself. That is who Imani Boyd was. That is who she had been all along, at $4.11, when nobody was watching and there was nothing in it for her. The story could end there and it would be enough. There is a last thing though, and it is the part Imani keeps, the part she does not tell when people ask how she went from a register to an office, because the version they want is a version about money and luck, and this part is not about either. It was the following spring. A year past the march that had taken Eli and almost taken Camille. Imani had been in the new job 9 months. She was good at it, better than she had let herself believe she would be, because it turned out the thing she had done at Register 4, the seeing, was a thing you could do in 41 stores if someone gave you the room. She had found the pearls. She had found a man in a store 2 states over who came in early to make coffee for the overnight stockers out of his own pocket and had been doing it for 11 years. And she had made sure he knew that somebody knew. She had found the ones $11 from the edge, and she had built, with Gideon's money and Camille's stubbornness, small, quiet floors under a great many lives. She had a desk. She had shoes that did not hurt. Naya's heels still lit up when she stamped. The Hartwells had Imani and Naya and Odessa to the house that spring. The big house Camille had once not been able to stand to be alone in and now could, because it was less empty than it had been. There was a garden out back that Camille had let go wild in her grief and was bringing back, and Naya ran into it the way children run into gardens, and Odessa lowered herself onto a bench with her good new knees and turned her face up to the sun. And Gideon Hartwell, who had once held a stranger's hand in both of his and thanked her for his daughter, walked Imani to the edge of the garden where a small tree had been planted, a young thing not much taller than Naya, with its first real spring of leaves on it. He did not say whose tree it was, he did not have to. Imani understood that somewhere under the new leaves was the name of a boy who had been 4, and that the garden Camille was bringing back was being brought back for him, and that the family had found, in the slow work of making a dead thing grow again, a way to say the true things that had been too big to pick up. "You did this," Gideon said, looking at the tree and not at her. "You know that. Not the job, not the money. That's just a man moving numbers. He should have moved a long time ago. This. The fact that she got out of the car, the fact that any of us are standing in this garden. You did that in the time it took to make change, and you have never once asked me for a thing for it, and I have made my peace with the fact that I will never be able to pay it, because some things a man is not meant to pay. He is only meant to pass them on." Imani stood next to him and watched her daughter run circles around the young tree, the lights in her heels flashing in the long gold light. She thought about the $4.11. She thought about how close she had come that grey afternoon to ringing the next customer's milk and letting the silver car go because her feet hurt and the line was long and it was not her business, and 1,000 people say, "Keep the change." She had not let it go. She did not fully know, even now, what had made her run. She had run anyway, and a woman had gotten out of a car, and a quiet man in a tall office had read a file and seen a person in it, and a great many lives she would never meet had a flaw under them now, because of a tip she had tried to give back. The world keeps a longer memory than people give it credit for. The small faithful thing a person does when no one is watching, the thing there is nothing in it for, has a way of coming back around the long way, years later, wearing a face you do not recognize, and standing at your counter, and asking for you by name. Camille came across the garden with 2 glasses of lemonade and handed one to Imani, and the 2 women stood in the place where the dead and the living were both held and watched the children, because Naya had pulled Camille's husband into a game and he was laughing, actually laughing, and Camille's hand found Imani's and held it, the way her father had, on both of hers. "You ran 6 blocks. Camille said again, the way she said it sometimes, like a thing she was keeping. "In terrible shoes," Imani said. And the 2 of them laughed, and the laugh went out over the garden and the young tree and the running children, and it was a real one, small but real. And it was in the end the only kind of vindication this story was ever after. Not money, not a corner office. A woman who had decided, on a grey afternoon, to be quiet about wanting to die, standing in a garden in the spring light, laughing out loud, holding the hand of the cashier, who had refused to let her go. If you have ever been the person at the register, the one nobody looks at twice, the one doing the math in the dark over a jar on the refrigerator, know that the seeing you do, the quiet, faithful attention you pay when there is nothing in it for you, is not wasted, and is never as small as it feels. And if a stranger's voice ever catches at you across a counter the way Camille's caught at Imani, you might be the only one who heard it. Run! They planted a second tree that fall, next to the first. Nobody had to say why. Imani drove out to the house to help, and she knelt in the cool dirt next to Gideon and Camille and packed the earth down around the slim trunk with her hands, and when it was done, the 3 of them stood back, and a small girl with lights in her shoes ran up and stamped them, and the lights flashed, and the leaves moved. And somewhere 6 blocks and a lifetime away, a jar on a refrigerator was finally quietly full.